The cursor blinks, a rhythmic digital heartbeat pulsing against a void of white. It is the only movement in the room. You sit before the screen, hands hovering inches above the keys, yet you do not strike. The silence here is heavy, pressing against your eardrums like deep water. Every time that thin, black line vanishes and reappears, it marks a second loss to the vacuum. You try to look away, to focus on the dust motes dancing in the harsh overhead light, but your eyes are drawn back to the center of the screen. The blink is relentless. It is a metronome counting down to nothing. You are not waiting for a spark of genius. You are waiting for the fear to subside, but the fear is the only thing keeping you anchored to the chair. The cursor does not judge, yet its steady mechanical pulse feels like an accusation. It demands a beginning. It demands a choice. You remain motionless, watching the light flicker, trapped in the precise moment before the first mistake can be made. The screen remains empty. The heartbeat continues. You are paralyzed. To begin is to commit a violence against possibility. As long as the screen remains white, every story is still true. Every outcome still exists in the ether of your mind. The moment you press a key, you collapse that infinite potential into a single, fragile reality. You fear the stroke because it is an act of exclusion. By choosing one word, you murder 1,000 others. You stare at the blinking line, paralyzed by the permanence of the act. You want the perfect opening, the flawless sentence that captures the totality of your intent without the stain of human error. But perfection is a static ghost. You are terrified that the first mark will be the wrong one, a permanent scar on the pristine surface that can never be undone. You hold your breath, your fingers rigid, caught in the agonizing gap between the potential for greatness and the reality of a draft. You are deciding which version of the truth to kill. The weight of that decision pins you to the desk. Once the first stroke lands, the void is gone. The silence of the room is suddenly punctured. A sharp, mechanical click echoes from the corner, then another. A metronome. It sits on the edge of the desk, its weighted arm swinging in a relentless, unforgiving arc. Each tick is a physical blow, a reminder that time is not a resource you possess, but a current dragging you toward an inevitable end. You reach out to stop it, to silence the rhythm that mocks your stagnation, but your hand trembles and pulls back. You are waiting for a guarantee. You want a sign that the path you choose will lead to triumph, that your efforts will be rewarded with absolute certainty. But the metronome does not care for your conditions. It ticks on, indifferent to your hesitation. You cover your ears, pressing your palms hard against your skull, but the sound only migrates inward. It syncs with your pulse. You are not waiting for inspiration. You are waiting for a permission slip from a life that will never provide one. The metronome fades, replaced by the sharp, metallic hiss of a faucet. You stand before the basin, hands held under the stream of ice-cold water. You scrub. You rub the soap into your palms until the lather is thick, white, and suffocating. You watch the gray runoff spiral down the drain, convinced that if you work hard enough, you can rinse away the residue of your own history. You scrub the knuckles, the cuticles, the spaces between your fingers, as if you were preparing for a procedure that requires absolute sterility. The water bites at your skin, turning it a deep, angry red, but you do not stop. You are trying to scrub your life clean. Removing every trace of dirt, every sign of touch, every remnant of the world outside. You want your life to be a blank, stainless surface, devoid of any messy human friction. But the water is freezing, and the skin is raw, and still, the feeling of being human remains. You move from the basin to the desk, opening a digital planner that slices your day into precise, 15-minute increments. You delete the lunch meeting because it is inefficient. You prune the evening call because it lacks a clear objective. You are curating your life with the cold precision of an archivist, stripping away every variable that might introduce friction. You treat your relationships like data points to be optimized, scheduling interactions, limiting conversations, and filtering out the messy, unpredictable impulses. You believe that if you can just balance the ledger of your time, you will finally achieve a state of perfect, friction-free existence. But look at the screen. The calendar is a grid of empty white boxes. There is no growth here. There is no decay. There is no life. You have built a vacuum, a sterile chamber where nothing can breathe because nothing is allowed to change. You watch the cursor blink. You are not living. You are merely maintaining a system that is hostile to the chaotic, vibrant reality of being. You stare at the grid of your life, and the lines begin to harden. They are no longer just markers of time, they are walls. You have built this structure with such care, polishing every corner, ensuring every angle is perfectly aligned to keep the mess of existence at bay. You step back to admire the clarity of your design, but the air in the room feels thin. You press your palm against the invisible barrier you have constructed, and it does not yield. It is transparent, beautiful, and utterly impenetrable. You can see the world moving outside, the chaotic, vibrant, unpredictable world, but you cannot touch it. You have created a glass cage, and you are the only occupant. Every effort to prevent an error, every attempt to sanitize your path has only served to thicken the walls. You are trapped in a masterpiece of your own making, a pristine enclosure where nothing can go wrong because nothing is allowed to happen. The light hits the glass and reflects back into your eyes, blinding you to the fact that you are suffocating. You are safe from the friction of life, yes, but you are also dying from the lack of it. You look for a door, a crack, a flaw in the pane, but the surface is flawless. You are perfectly contained. You believe that if you work hard enough, if you calculate every variable, you can hold the chaos of tragedy at bay. You sit at your desk, running simulations of your future, mapping out every potential disaster with the cold logic of an actuary. You account for the market crash, the sudden illness, the broken promise, the unexpected loss. You build a fortress of contingencies, a labyrinth of if-then statements designed to steer you clear of the jagged edges of fate. But the math is lying to you. You are not a master of your fate. You are merely a prisoner of your own meticulousness. You add another layer of protection, another safeguard, and the system grows more complex, more brittle, more prone to catastrophic failure. You watch the numbers shift, trying to find the perfect equilibrium where nothing can go wrong. It is a delusion. The world does not care about your spreadsheets. A single gust of wind, a stray thought, a heartbeat missed. The chaos you fear is already inside the walls. You are not the architect of your destiny. You are the inmate of your own standards. Look at your hands. They are steady, precise, and entirely bound by the rules you have written for yourself. You wake, you work, you optimize, and you repeat, convinced that this rigid cycle is the path to liberation. It is not. It is a cell. You have traded your autonomy for the safety of a predictable outcome, and now you cannot even conceive of a choice that falls outside your own parameters. You try to deviate, to leave a task unfinished, to let a deadline pass, to embrace a moment of genuine disorder, but your pulse quickens, your breath hitches, and you pull back. The fear of imperfection is the lock on your door. You are a prisoner of your own meticulousness, serving a master that does not exist, bowing to a standard that yields nothing but exhaustion. You have become so efficient at maintaining your own confinement that you no longer see the bars. You believe you are in control because you are the one holding the key, but you have forgotten that the key is welded to your own wrist. You are the guard and the captive. The mask of the high achiever is a heavy burden, forged from the expectations you project onto yourself. It is not something you put on. It is something you become. You move through your day with a calculated grace, ensuring every gesture is measured, every word is polished, and every interaction is devoid of any messy, human friction. You are terrified that a single lapse in composure will reveal the void beneath. You stand before the mirror and practice the expression of effortless competence, smoothing the lines of doubt until your face feels like cold stone. You try to smile, but the muscles resist, locked in the rigid geometry of your own design. You are performing a role that demands absolute consistency, And the strain is beginning to show in the way you hold your shoulders, in the tightness of your jaw, in the shallow rhythm of your breath. You are so busy maintaining the image that you have forgotten how to simply exist. 4 in the morning. The alarm does not ring. It vibrates, a sharp electric sting against the silence of the room. You are awake before the sound finishes, eyes snapping open to the darkness. There is no transition from sleep to consciousness, only the immediate, brutal resumption of the performance. You sit up, your spine rigid, your mind already cataloging the variables of the next 18 hours. Every movement is calculated to minimize waste. You step onto the cold floor, the temperature grounding you in the reality of your own exhaustion. You walk to the desk, the wood grain familiar under your fingertips, and you begin. You check the metrics, you adjust the projections, you scrub the minor errors from the draft, with a focus that borders on the frantic. Your hands tremble, just for a second, as you reach for the pen, but you steady them with a sharp intake of breath. You cannot afford a tremor. You work in the dark, a ghost in your own home, driven by the singular crushing fear that the world will wake up and find you less than perfect. The air in the room feels thin, as if the oxygen is being consumed by the sheer intensity of your focus. You lean over the desk, your chest pressing against the edge, and for the first time, you feel the resistance. It is not just the work, it is the weight of the expectations you have piled upon your own lungs. Every time you inhale, your ribs seem to grate against a tightening band of tension. You try to draw a full, deep breath, but the air stops halfway, trapped by a sudden sharp constriction in your throat. Your heart hammers against your sternum, a frantic, irregular rhythm that echoes in your ears. You reach for the edge of the table, knuckles turning white, trying to anchor yourself as the room begins to tilt. The pressure is no longer abstract. It is a physical force, a heavy, invisible hand pressing down on your shoulders. You stare at the screen, but the words have lost their meaning. They are just shapes, black ink on a blinding white field that stretches into an infinite hungry abyss. This is the pit. You have been feeding it for years, throwing your youth into the dark, watching it vanish without a sound. You remember the nights you traded for a few more hours of progress, the sleep you sacrificed to polish a single sentence, the birthdays missed, the quiet moments discarded in the name of optimization. It was never enough. The pit does not care about your history or your effort. It only demands the next piece of your life. You reach out to measure how much you have left, but your hands are empty. There is no reserve. Your stamina is gone. Your focus is frayed. And yet the screen pulses, waiting for another sacrifice. You are standing on the edge, looking down into the hollow space you have carved out of your own existence. It is vast, cold, and entirely indifferent to your exhaustion. You try to pull back, to step away from the precipice, but the momentum of your own perfectionism drags you forward. You are not working anymore. You are merely falling. Your hand is locked around the barrel of the pen, knuckles white and straining against the plastic. You are trying to force one last line, one final correction, but your muscles have reached their limit. The pen is a conduit for all the pressure you have been carrying, a fragile bridge between your intent and the page. You squeeze harder. The plastic groans under the force of your grip, a tiny, high-pitched protest that goes unnoticed. Your thumb digs into the casing, your index finger curls tight, and the tension becomes a singular, vibrating point of agony. Then, the threshold is crossed. The pen does not just break, it gives way with a sharp, violent crack. You watch, frozen, as the two halves of the pen tumble onto the table, ink leaking from the fractured center like a dark stain. The performance is over. Your hand hangs limp, trembling, no longer capable of holding the weight of the facade. The silence in the room is heavy, thick with the scent of spilled ink and the metallic tang of overheated electronics. You look up from the desk, your eyes drifting toward the marble figure standing in the corner. It has always been there, a silent witness to your years of rigid, calculated effort. You try to look away, to focus on the wreckage of the pen, but a sound draws your gaze back, a faint, sharp splintering noise that vibrates through the floorboards. You hold your breath, watching the smooth, white surface of the face, A hairline fracture begins at the temple, a jagged, dark vein creeping across the cheek. It moves with a slow, deliberate cruelty, splitting the perfection you spent a lifetime cultivating. You reach out, your fingers hovering inches from the stone, but you do not touch it. You know that if you press against the marble, the entire structure will collapse. The crack deepens, widening into a dark, yawning chasm that bisects the eyes. It is not just stone breaking, it is the visual proof that the facade is no longer holding. You are watching your own reflection in the ruin, and for the first time, the stone face looks back at you with a terrifying, fractured honesty. The hairline fracture is no longer enough. The tension that held the porcelain mask together reaches a breaking point, and the sound of the collapse begins as a low, grinding groan. Large, jagged shards of white stone peel away from the face, clattering against the floor like broken teeth. You lunge forward, hands outstretched, desperate to catch the falling pieces, to press them back into place and hide the ruin. Your fingers brush against the cold, sharp edges of the debris, but the momentum is too great. The mask is not merely cracking, it is disintegrating. A final, violent tremor runs through the pedestal, and the remaining structure gives way in a thunderous cascade of dust and stone. The room is filled with the sound of snapping ceramic and the sharp, rhythmic impact of fragments hitting the ground. You fall to your knees, surrounded by the white, pulverized remains. There is no more surface to polish, no more facade to maintain. The air is thick with the grit of the destruction, settling on your skin and in your hair. You look at the pile of rubble, the sharp edges catching the harsh overhead light, and you realize the performance has finally ended. The mask is gone. You remain on the floor, the grit of the shattered mask grinding into your palms. The room no longer feels like a sanctuary of order. It feels like a wilderness. You stand, your legs trembling, and reach for the desk to steady yourself, but your hand finds only uneven, jagged debris. The sterile, predictable geometry of your life has been replaced by the sharp, unpredictable edges of the ruin. You take a step, and the floorboards groan under your weight, shifting in ways they never did before. There is no script for this. There is no variable left to calculate. The air feels different, heavier, colder, and filled with the scent of raw stone and dust. You look toward the door, expecting the familiar, but the shadows have stretched, distorting the corners of the room into unrecognizable shapes. Every movement is a gamble. Every breath is an experiment in uncertainty. You are no longer the architect of a curated existence. The perfection you worshipped was a cage, and now that the bars have fallen, the space around you has expanded into a terrifying, boundless void. The light above you flickers once, a dying pulse of artificial brilliance, then snaps into nothingness. The darkness is not merely an absence of light. It is a physical weight that presses against your eyes and lungs. You reach out, fingers clawing at the air, searching for the wall, for the desk, for any familiar geometry to anchor your sense of self. Your hand meets only empty space where the solid structure of your life used to be. You stumble, your foot catching on a sharp piece of the fallen mask, and you go down hard into the grit. The silence is absolute, a heavy shroud that muffles the sound of your own heartbeat. You try to call out, but the sound dies in your throat, swallowed by the vast, suffocating void. The pieces of the facade you once carried are scattered somewhere in the dark, buried under the weight of this sudden, total collapse. You press your forehead against the cold, uneven ground, letting the darkness consume the last remnants of the person you were. The air in the void is thin, yet it carries the scent of something new, damp earth and the sharp tang of ozone. You lie still, waiting for the familiar pressure of the mask to return, but there is only the weight of your own body against the floor. You inhale. The breath is jagged, hitching in your chest as it fills lungs that have forgotten how to expand without permission. It hurts, but it is a real hurt. It is not the phantom ache of a failed performance. You push yourself up, your palms pressing into the grit, and you feel the texture of the ruins, not as a failure, but as a foundation. You are broken, yes, but the pieces no longer have to fit a predetermined shape. You stand, unsteadily, and the darkness does not retreat. It simply waits. You take another breath, deeper this time, and the terror of the unknown begins to recede, replaced by a cold, clear clarity. There is no script to follow. You are standing in the wreckage of a life you no longer own, and for the first time, the silence is not a void. It is a space you have finally earned the right to inhabit. Look at the marble. The crack is not a flaw, it is the point of entry for the light. Watch as the structure gives way, the stone yielding to the inevitable pull of gravity. Each grain of dust that drifts to the floor is a piece of the performance you no longer need to maintain. The statue is gone. The facade is dust. What remains is not the perfection you chased, but the raw, jagged reality of the present moment. You are standing in the aftermath, and the air is clear. The silence is no longer heavy. It is open. It is the sound of a life finally unburdened by the weight of what others expect. There is no more script to memorize. There is no more mask to polish. You are left with the ruins, and in those ruins you are finally free to exist without apology. The dust settles. Breathe.